All right, good morning. It's wonderful to be here in the heart of Kern County in Bakersfield again. This is always a great place to be, and why? Because you have great people here working on important things. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to support the Kern Community College District. Thank you to the Board of Trustees for the work that you're doing to lead this district, to hire people like Sonia and many of the other chancellors that you've had here, the team that you have at all three colleges, the presidents, the faculty, the amazing faculty of the Kern Community College District, and of course, the people that make the college's work, the classified staff of the Kern Community College District. Thank you. So, besides seeing lots of good friends, why am I here? I'm here because this is a clear example of what we want to see happen at every community college district up and down the state of California. From the Oregon border all the way down to Chula Vista and everywhere in between. The beauty of the California community college system is that we are 116 colleges, certainly the largest system of higher education in the country. We are in virtually every community in the state of California, from the coast to the valley, to the inland, to everywhere in between, to the far north. So we provide access to 100% of Californians. That's a point of pride for us. We accept the top 100% of students in the California community colleges. And that's a great opportunity for a state like California. I've had a chance to be in many, many states, and I love my country, but I am glad I'm in California. Because as challenging as things may feel today in communities like this, that challenge, one, is not unique. It's felt across the country. But we live in a state that is trying to focus on solutions, on problem solving, on activities that lead to lifting people throughout the state. So let me focus on that before I call up my guests. So first of all, the California Community Colleges Board of Governors, who were my bosses, approved of a strategic vision called the Vision for Success about 5 years ago. And that vision put a clear target on equity. We feel very clearly and very passionately that California cannot be successful if communities like Kern and communities up and down the San Joaquin Valley are not successful. So in that vision, we identified 3 areas of the state that we needed to specifically focus on, specifically. And that includes the San Joaquin Valley, the Inland Empire, and the far north. 3 areas of the state that I'm sure those of you living here feel sometimes are forgotten. And here in Kern, the heart of the farm worker movement, the heart of agriculture, the heart of California energy, we cannot be successful if we leave Kern behind. We cannot. So that's why I'm here, because of the work that's happening here and how important this is to our future as Californians, our future as the California community colleges, and our future as a nation. Because as California goes, so will the nation go. This community feeds a lot of the nation. This community provides energy for much of the nation. This community provides innovation for much of the nation. And so within this community, we have to create opportunity for everyone in the community. Everyone. And so that's why community colleges are uniquely positioned to do that. Because we're in this community. We are community colleges. And we can bring together folks like you. We can bring together our Cal State University partners, the University of California partners, workforce and economic development practitioners. We can bring the governor's office down. We can work with the federal government and bring everybody together to focus on a pathway to good jobs. So I'm old enough to know that I have talked about good jobs for most of my career. And very rarely do we see the action actually translate into real results. But we're at a point in time in our nation's history, we're at a point in time in the history of California where that can no longer be acceptable. We have to not only talk about good jobs, we have to create good jobs, and we have to help communities like this access good jobs. Again, coming out of this pandemic, coming out of all the devastation we saw over the last couple of years, both in terms of health impacts to communities like this, economic impacts, and the list goes on. I really appreciate Governor Newsom and his focus on a post-pandemic recovery with equity. It has got to be about equity. This time around, coming out of this crisis, we have to make sure that we recover with equity. Too many crises in the past we've come out of, and we continue to leave communities like this behind. It cannot happen this time because we will not have a California that we've grown up with and know and love in the future if we don't do something about this today. So that brings me to the opportunity I have today, which is to invite a couple of special guests to talk to me about that, to talk to me about the future of California, to talk to me about good jobs, pathways to good jobs, and what we're doing to try and get there, both from the point of view of the state of California, as well as the federal government. And I'm very appreciative of Governor Newsom and his team, President Biden and his team. Yes, there has been a lot going on in this state and this country. There's a lot going on in the news today. Every single day we wake up and there is something happening. We live in a very unique, interesting, and sometimes very frustrating moment in the history of our country. But that is why we need to solve problems at the closest level to those who are affected by it. And so that's what we need to keep the focus on. We need to show Washington, D.C. what it's going to take to make things work. We need to show Sacramento in communities like this what is it going to take to make solutions work on the ground. So today, I'm very pleased to have two problem solvers join me, two people who understand the importance of this moment in time that we live in, and the importance of leveraging federal and state policy to help communities like Kern. So, if I can ask Ben Chida and Amy Loyd to come on up to the stage and join me. Ben Chida is Chief Deputy Cabinet Secretary for Governor Gavin Newsom. He has been involved in lots of different parts of the California government, including higher education. I work very closely, all the system leaders of the California community colleges, all the system leaders of higher education, including President Drake from the UC, as well as the Chancellor of the CSU, work closely with Ben Chida on policies that impact higher education throughout California. So I'm pleased to have him here with us, as well as Dr. Amy Loyd, who is Senior Advisor to Secretary Miguel Cardona, Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona, is also the nominee for Assistant Secretary of Oakley. I'll let her describe what Oakley is, but everything having to do with workforce and adult training in the Department of Education. So welcome to both of you, and why don't we start with you, Ben? Just tell the audience a little bit about what you do for the governor, and then I'll turn to Amy, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Yeah, so hi everybody, thank you for having me. It's so great to be here. I am the governor's principal advisor on all things education and workforce, and it's very intentional that we think about it in those terms. We think about sort of the entire cradle to career spectrum from early childhood all the way through to a workforce, because we understand that you can't silo off and segment off each of these, each sort of stage of a student's life or their journey through this to a good job. And so what I do is everything from our universal TK expansion through to our K-12 investments, including universal after school and universal school nutrition, also higher ed, which goes into our compacts, and a lot of our workforce work. I should note, and it's very important to note, there's literally hundreds of people throughout our administration who work on these issues. I'm just sort of the funnel, so to speak, to make sure that we have a coherent sort of theory across all of those elements.
Amy?
Thank you, and thank you everyone for having me here today. I'm here today on behalf of Secretary Miguel Cardona and on behalf of the entire Biden-Harris administration to learn from you, to connect with you. I'm so inspired by all that I have already learned and seen about Kern County Community College District, and I know the great work in the Central Valley and the Inland Empire. I was just reconnecting with a friend and colleague who I got to know from her work at Riverside over a decade ago. Like, this is where innovation is happening. So in my work at the Department of Education, I am a senior advisor to the secretary, as Eloy had mentioned. I'm also the nominee for assistant secretary for the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, which encompasses community colleges, correctional education, adult education, CTE. However, I'm not in that position currently. I'm here on behalf of the secretary and from the Office of the Secretary to talk about the secretary's broader commitment to this work and to talk about the administration's broader commitment to this work. And in my work with the secretary, I advise him on things related to, we know the inextricable interdependence of education, workforce development, and economic development. And we know, just as Ben's role encompasses, multiple silos, we know that we span across those areas in order to serve people. And I really appreciate and am honored to serve for an administration that prioritizes people and puts equity at the center of our work, and that really understands the need to think about education with a purpose and ensuring that through education people are able to engage in meaningful learning that helps them pursue rewarding careers and have fulfilling lives. So I'm happy to have a conversation with you today.
Great. And this kind of feels like an election debate here, but we'll try not to debate, but we will try to get into some issues that I think are important to this community. So let me begin with you, Ben. You have a very big job. The state of California is the 5th largest economy in the world. Certainly a key driver of economic success for the nation. And the state has been hit hard by the pandemic. We've had 2 years of some very difficult times. At the same time, there's been this huge increase in the state budget, so there are tremendous resources. So as we think about, as you and the governor's team think about how to invest in the recovery with equity, what are some of the things that you're focused on and that communities like this should be thinking about?
Yeah, I would say we're focused on two. So big picture, well, we're doing essentially what any good business or good organization would do, which is when you have additional funds, when you have a surplus, you reinvest it in your people. You reinvest it in your long-term capacity to innovate and to continue the prosperity throughout communities across the state. So that's sort of first and foremost. I would say a lot of our thinking falls into 2 buckets. Bucket number 1 is aligning our systems towards the lived reality of our students, and then bucket number 2 is pointing those students towards their future. So I distinguish between them because the first bucket is really about making sure that we're meeting the needs of the whole student and the whole child as they're moving through. So when I was talking about universal school nutrition, that's about making sure that no child needs to learn on an empty stomach. When we're talking about universal after school, that's about maximizing the time that we have in class, in addition to actually having care for our families to enable working families to actually make things work. So there's a lot of our work that is focused specifically on taking a look at our systems, figuring out to what extent they do or don't align with the lived reality of the people that we're trying to serve, and do our best to recenter onto the student and the family. The second big bucket that we think a lot about is sort of pointing students towards the future. And that's not just about, it's about good jobs, for sure. It's also about relevancy and re-engaging our students. So I am personally, I say this sometimes, but it's not an exaggeration. Community colleges saved my life. I had dropped out of high school. I had been experiencing disengagement from school and experiencing mental health challenges. And ultimately, it was the pathway back into community colleges were the pathway back into education and a career for me. And so a lot of our second sort of bucket of focus is on the series of policies, of which there are many, that are focused on trying to inspire students and to expose them to the different career opportunities that they might be interested in, and to make sure that that pathway towards those opportunities are as smooth as possible.
So before I go to Amy, Ben, let me ask you a quick question. So there's a lot of focus today on pathways to good jobs and building pathways and building off of the guided pathways model. The key to that is data, is making sure that we have data to know what kind of wages these jobs will have, what kind of wages our students are earning, what kind of educational outcomes are important to getting to there. So you've been leading an effort to create a cradle-to-career data system. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that will impact the work happening here?
Yeah, so I'm sure that everyone here knows, but California lags behind when it comes to data infrastructure. We are one of only about 4 states that does not have a longitudinal data system for education. And so it was actually my very first task that I got from the governor. We were starting a transition, and he was like, this is just like embarrassing. Please fix this. So we've been working on fixing it. It is the type of work that you are all very, very familiar with, which is, it's easy for all of us to align on the vision of, yeah, let's share data, let's improve outcomes. But then once you actually get down at the nitty-gritty of MOUs and lawyers signing on to things and data dictionaries, it becomes harder and harder. Kathy Booth has masterfully navigated us through a lot of this work over the past 2 years, really. But we're super excited. We launched the Office of Cradle-to-Career Data. We are going to have an exciting announcement over the next 2 weeks on the level of buy-in that we have at the state level. But there's just 2 things I want to note on why I'm excited about the data system especially. The first is we're basically going to leapfrog every other state. We're behind right now. We're about to leapfrog every other state by a lot.
Excellent.
Yeah, super. In really 2 ways that we've been really excited about from the get-go. The first is trying to broaden the scope of data that we're really talking about. So if we're talking about longitudinal data, we're usually talking about academic or educational data. And I think what we all recognize here is that the student's experience and their outcomes is not limited to what's happening in the classroom. More often than not, what's happening outside the classroom is more relevant. So from the get-go, we've pulled in our partners from the Health and Human Services agencies, from EDD, from the Labor Agency, and others to make sure that all partners who are touching on the sort of pathway, sort of the journey of a student from cradle to career are part of the conversation around sharing data, because we want to see all those elements. We don't want to just see what's happening in the classroom. We also want to see social services and other data as well that we want to link it together ultimately. The second big thing that we're really excited about is, usually when we're talking about data, we're talking about sort of analytical insights. What I mean by that is let's put some data together, let's give it to some academics, and then let's have them put together some policy papers, which is super valuable, obviously, right? We need to know what's working and what's not working. But besides that, we also need to demonstrate to families and students the value of good, sound data infrastructure. We actually need to use the same data infrastructure to build tools to actually empower families to navigate these systems. At the end of the day, all you're really talking about is integration of data across these systems, which also could power these tools that could help, for example, a student plan out their career from high school through the California College Guidance Initiative. What we're trying to power there is essentially enabling students to use their own data, have a tailored counseling experience in which they are mapping out how they get from high school through to the career of their choice. And so that's why we're super excited about the data system. We're about to leapfrog every other state, and it's just one part of it's the backbone really of our overall agenda, but it's just one part of it.
Well, that is exciting. So let's move to the federal government, to Washington, D.C.
Sure.
And the brain trust of the Department of Education, and Dr. Amy Loyd. So Amy, you have been at the department basically since the administration began. There's been a lot going on in Washington, D.C. It's a very strange time. It's a very stressful time, but there's also some opportunities there. So coming out of the recession, or as a response to the recession, the president issued the American Recovery Plan, which has put a lot of money into communities like this. How are you thinking about how that money is being spent? How would you like to see that money spent in communities like this? And also, what are some of the thinking coming out of this pandemic about this issue of good jobs? How is the Department of Education thinking about this?
Wow, those are great questions. Well, first of all, I mean, we started, none of us asked to serve in the middle of a pandemic, but here we are. And all of us, in all of your roles, are leading through like unprecedentedly challenging times. And we know that it's taken its toll on all of us individually, on all of us collectively, on the people, the families, the communities that we serve. And so entering this administration at this moment in time has been certainly unique. The Secretary is very proud that, on the K-12 side of things, we went from about 48% of schools open when we took office to now almost 100% of schools open. But we're looking in the higher education space and thinking, how do we ensure, especially with our community colleges, which we know are the backbone of our higher education system, which we know, I used to say community colleges are the center of the universe in many ways because you reach back to K-12, you're responsive to employers, you partner with 4 years, you put the community in community college and really engage deeply with the whole ecosystem that Ben was just describing for the great data system that I can't wait to see, the whole ecosystem supporting students. So how do we ensure that our community colleges are remaining not just stable, but thriving throughout this pandemic and help us truly, to use the president's phrase, truly build back better as a community, as a country? And so when we think about the incredible influx of dollars that the American Rescue Plan has provided, we think about this much in the way that you were just describing. Yes, one-time investment, but if ever there was a one moment in time for us to really reimagine what we're doing in education, how we're breaking down the disjunctures and the silos and the disconnects between K-12 and higher ed, between education and the world of work, between community and classroom, this is it. We're so hungry, all of us, to go back to normal, right? Even being here in person with you in this room is feeding my soul because I haven't been to many in-person connections yet. So we're hungry for normal, but please, please, please do not go back to normal. If normal is what was 3 years ago or 30 years ago, in terms of how our education system was ultimately not serving all of our students equitably. We have we have lived through the impossible and proven that we can thrive in the impossible. We shifted to online learning in a matter of days, weeks. Who would have thought that 3 years ago? And now we have this opportunity with the influx of ARP funds, American Rescue Plan, we speak in acronyms in the federal government, to think about investing significantly in the systems, the structures, the partnerships that will help you reimagine education for careers, for career pathways, for communities in ways that work for you and your communities. So that's how we're really envisioning, whether you're talking about the elementary and secondary ESSER funds or HERF in the higher education space or other forms of ARP, we're really looking to places that are investing significant dollars into reimagining how education takes place and really does deliver for people. And so I'm excited to think about the possibility here because as the Chancellor was describing earlier, I love how deliberate Kern County is in ensuring that it's not just access, it's not just providing opportunity, it's ensuring equitable engagement and meaningful opportunity for students. So looking at what you've done with dual enrollment and early college and guided pathways and thinking about how you might extend that, not just to a completion agenda, but to a connection to lifelong success agenda is really powerful. And so our hope is that ARP dollars could be used for such things.
So, yes. And unfortunately, there has been a huge investment in states like California, and we're very appreciative to the administration and the Congress. There's a lot of work happening here around building a new economy. Yep. I'll start with you, Amy, then I'll put it over to Ben. So in response to what's happening across the world, to climate change, to the issues of national defense, this community, like many, are innovating around a new economy. Things like carbon capture and sequestration, you know, transitioning an oil energy economy into a cleaner economy, cleaner energy economy. Things like microgrids, and of course agriculture. Here in Kern County, one of the hearts of agriculture in the country is transforming before our very eyes through the use of technology. So in your role at the department and the department in general, how are you thinking about supporting that kind of innovation? How can communities like this partner with the federal government, not just the Department of Education, but certainly there's a lot going on in the Department of Labor, Department of Commerce. What advice do you have for this community, and what would you like to see happen with some of these initiatives?
Well, first of all, Secretary Cardona has charged us at the department with being a service organization. Like, he really has instilled in all of us his heart for service. Like, we are here to serve you and to help you do your best work. So if ever you're encountering roadblocks, disjunctures, frustrations that could be addressed through federal policy, please, please let us know. Like, we want to hear about what you're experiencing so that we can work at the federal level to help make things better, not just for you, but for all of our country. And when I think about like what's happening here, the president of the Board of Trustees last night said, you know what, Kern County feeds, fuels, and defends our nation. And thinking about the important role that not just Kern County, but all of rural America has to play in ensuring that, you know, our nation is strong is something that I'm also committed to. The Secretary just launched this past year a Rural Strategy and Action Team, which is to work in partnership with rural communities, to elevate their needs, to have rural voices inform federal policy in powerful ways. And I think about what's happening here with respect to like aerospace innovation. And, you know, hearing from, I saw Sean earlier, but hearing from Sarah Coso and how exciting the work is there, thinking about what's happening overall in Kern with agriculture and entrepreneurship, agriculture and technology, and innovation in agriculture writ large, the Energy Center and learning about the Energy Center here and thinking about, you know, not just carbon sequestration, that's a hard word to say, but also clean energy and grid resilience and thinking about creating economic opportunity to fuel your communities and sustain jobs right here. And then thinking about clean transportation, like you are, as a region, and our rural communities have the opportunity and the potential to stay 2 steps ahead of where we are currently in policy, of where we are in practice, and thinking, what do we need in the future? How are we preparing our rural communities and our urban and suburban, but really like looking at the heart of what rural innovation is happening here to help us as a nation lean into the new spaces, the new economies that we know we need. And I think about like things like we're preparing for infrastructure jobs right now because you know, the bipartisan infrastructure law will create millions of new jobs in lots of high-demand fields that connect to things like broadband deployment investments. So how are we connecting like major federal investments? You know, we have $65 billion to help close the digital divide. Like, how are we connecting from a federal level that sort of work to the community colleges work and the community's work writ large in new economy jobs that will help you ensure that your young people and adults alike have access to meaningful career opportunities through the education system and the ability to choose to stay in their home community and earn a living wage, raise a family, and support their young people to go on to create the next future jobs. So we're very excited about how major federal investments can connect to your leading work on the ground and to learning from you and working in partnership with you to think about how we can do better on our end. I will say that the Secretary has charged us to work closely with Labor and Commerce. So every week I confer with my other senior leaders across agencies. I also sit on an interagency working group related to energy economies and how many communities like here are pivoting from oil and gas to green economies. So thinking about like how we can ensure that any policy we make is grounded in the real experiences of what you're leading is what I'm here to do.
Well, it's wonderful to hear, and it's always important that California's economy be represented in the halls of D.C. since we are so far away. So thank you. Ben, Governor has put a lot of focus on job creation, on innovation, and holding on to the gains that we've made through the pandemic in leveraging technology. So how are you and the Governor's team thinking about the kinds of pathways that are being created here in Kern County and the kinds of support that and investments that you'd like to see made? in places like this?
Yeah, so I have three thoughts, ending with the sort of investment specific to Kern County that we're really focusing on. But the first thought is just, my favorite part of this job is that we get to be the bulldog for California. Unlike Amy, Amy has to look at all states' interests. Like, from our perspective, every other state can,
Can learn from you.
can do their thing. We're gonna focus, but that's all to say. One of my favorite parts of this job is, we're always focused on maintaining California's dominance, and not only on the existing sectors that we may have dominance over, but also on emerging sectors as well. And so the governor always says, skate to where the puck is going. And so we're always trying to see where the puck is going, try to get California there as quickly as possible. Second, I think big picture, we see economic development as very much a regional proposition. California is not one big economy, we're many, many different regional economies, and so a lot of our policy structures actually reflect that. We have $600 million from last year's budget that we're implementing. Some of you might be part of this process around the Community Economic Resilience Fund. And that is an effort to create sort of 13 regional plans or strategies for where the communities want to go. Not dictated down from Sacramento, but rather from the communities up, with stakeholders from different areas coming together and saying, hey, here's where we are right now, here's where we think our future is going to be in 5, 10-year time horizons, and let's make sure that we have a shared common vision across policymakers, leaders, stakeholders within each given region. And then related to that, we have another $250 million from last year's budget, which is already enacted, we're implementing now, is the K-16 collaboratives that we were talking about earlier. And in our mind, really the K-16 collaboratives are the how, or the more tactical questions. So, the Community Economic Resilience Fund, those groups are gonna say, here's where and why we're gonna go, here's where we're going and why. The K-16 collaboratives is gonna be a subset of that group saying, okay, let's sit down, let's work together as K-12 leaders, higher ed leaders, private sector, and let's figure out the how do we get to that vision for a regional future. And so that's the sort of second big thought in terms of just actually creating structures to make this happen. Not only hope that it happens, but actually set tables and make sure that we're compensating people for their time, because we know this type of coordination and alignment and vision setting takes a lot of work and a lot of time. And then lastly, when it comes to this region in particular, as Eloy was saying, we're really focused on trying to seed as much as possible where we see the future is going. So for example, in the governor's budget this January, we have $80 million for CSU Bakersfield to establish an energy innovation center. We have several $100 million when it comes to transitioning certain workers in the energy sector and making sure that there's a meaningful and just transition. And then on top of that, we have investments in health and in education, including a joint partnership between UCSF and UC Merced when it comes to creating more, expanding the pipeline for talent when it comes to healthcare workers, including nurses and doctors and the like. So that's all to say, I think that for us, we come at California from a very regional perspective. And what we want to see is for regions to determine their own future, with the state coming in and seeding and supporting and investing wherever we can help to accelerate that work and that progress towards that shared vision.
Thank you, Ben. So we're coming up on time, so as we close, I just want to say thank you to this community for the work that you're doing. Yes, we are broken up into regions, but it's communities like this that lift regions. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and we hope to continue to do everything we can to support you. So as we close, let me start with you, Ben, and I'll give Amy the last word. On behalf of you and the governor's team, what would you like this community to know about the future of good jobs in California?
Yeah, it's a big question. I would say for us, we have a theory of what a good job is that is very related to what's been talked about, that I think is a little bit, that ties in to not only individual families and their ability to put food on the table, but also our shared future as Californians. So I'm hoping that people can align around this sense, and here's what we mean, which is what we see is a lack of meaning, a lack of inspiration among especially our young people in terms of coming into jobs. Mm-hmm. And so what we think is the solution is jobs that help to inspire young people, and we generally know what the ingredients of that are. It means a job that creates that enables workers, to actually put food on their family's table and that is durable and predictable over time. I think that's usually what we talk about when we talk about good jobs. But on top of that, what we see is jobs that help contribute to the community and to the regional economic future, and jobs that help to solve big, hairy problems for the state, for the nation, for the whole world, and also for future generations. And so, this sounds like a big sort of order, so to speak, but there are a good number of jobs that fit these criteria. So for example, the reason why we're investing so much in climate is because if you're moving into the climate sector in its various forms right now, you can be pretty assured that you'll have a job for, unfortunately. A long, long time. You can also be assured that you are contributing to your regional economic future, and that you're lifting up your community. And on top of that, you can know that you are solving a big problem on behalf of the state and future generations. And so to us, that is the ingredient, those are the ingredients of a job that really, is not just a job, but is also a meaningful sort of part of one's identity and character. And so I think if I were to have you all are doing all of the amazing legwork of actually serving students and families. And as we're doing that, I think the one thing I would just hope is that we can help to inspire and to marshal the energy of young people right now, not only to focus in on their own their own families and their own sort of day-to-day lives, but also big picture. Help us solve. Let's all come together and confront these big challenges that are facing all of us, is, I think, the one message that we would want to make sure that we communicate from the governor's office.
Here,
here. All right, thank you, Ben. And for the last word?
So last week, the Secretary had a budget hearing in which he put forward 3 priorities that he holds for our administration. So one is closing achievement gaps, and we know that these gaps have been longstanding prior to the pandemic. We know that they've probably deepened and widened along race, class, gender, community, socioeconomic status, zip code during the pandemic. So that's, of course, a big one that we care about with a lens on equity. Another is, of course, social emotional learning, mental health, and ensuring the fundamental wellness of our students and families and communities. But the third is really where the Secretary is pushing us to be bold and provocative, and where you are already standing firmly, which is on creating seamless pathways that integrate rigorous academics and powerful career-connected learning from really starting in middle grades or earlier, but from pre-K-12 through post-secondary and into careers. And so we're going to launch at the department an initiative, Student GPS, Growing Pathways to Success. It's a big focus for the Secretary, who knows that the work of aligning career-connected learning for all students, not just those fortunate in high-quality CTE programs, is essential to building our future workforce. And that said, the other piece of this is that we know that no longer is this a linear progression, right? You don't go to school and then maybe go to some form of post-secondary and then work and then retire. We are in a world of lifelong learning back and forth between post-secondary, between real-world experience and the world of work. And so thinking about the multiple on-ramps and off-ramps that you're creating for people over a lifetime, so how to prepare young people to launch them, to build the future, and how to ensure that all workers, all people of all walks of life have meaningful access to quickly plug in or more long-term plug in to think about their own aspirations at any moment in time through post-secondary education. So we're committed to making post-secondary education more equitable, affordable, and inclusive, and to connecting all of our education system much more strongly to careers, and really appreciate your leadership in this work.
All right, well, on that note, please join me in thanking Senior Advisor Amy Loyd and Chief Deputy Ben Chida for being with us today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.